Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. The world's on fire right now. And, one of my really good friends and listeners to this podcast made a very good comment and a very good statement on Twitter and on Facebook. And he said, be careful of watching the main event when there's probably something they're trying to distract you from. Now, it was hard for me to hear that, given that I have, I guess I have a personal bias towards Israel, meaning that I think we should be doing stuff despite what a lot of people would say. But that's because of my own personal and religious views. That said, I know that any more interventionism is a bad plan. Anytime we intervene in any kind of conflict, we end up making it worse. The United States does. However, it looks like we already have. And what I mean by this is I think that the story that my friend was talking about that would probably highlight this is there's two. Number one is that they have started questioning Joe Biden, about the Hunter Biden stuff and about his handling of top secret stuff. That hit the news today on several news sites, but it was kind of backdoored by the war in Israel. I think that would be the number one main story that they're distracting us from, or maybe if you believe in such things. And number two, the story that is coming out, and you're seeing it in real time, is these weapons possibly came from Ukraine or Afghanistan, were left behind by Afghanistan. They were American-issued weapons, either way. You're seeing Hamas militants that have crossed over from Gaza into Israel with M16s or AR-15s. You're also seeing with 240 Bravos, which is a belt-fed squad automatic weapon. It's usually cruise served, so it's a larger one. It's a 308 caliber. They're now reporting that there's up to 11 American citizens that have been killed by Hamas. Okay. Now, what is more interesting to me is what not Benjamin Netanyahu, one of the generals who is in charge of the Israeli Defense Forces said, is that they are basically greenlighting anyone to carry a firearm right now in Israel. Israel doesn't have the Second Amendment. Unlike the United States, neither did Ukraine. But the minute the defecation hits the fan, they're looking for anyone armed or capable to defend themselves and the people around them. And that brings the Second Amendment into place. Ian Crosland from timcast.com, he made a very keen observation. It's something that us in the 2A community, and thus us that are kind of more of the center or the right of the political spectrum, have been saying for years. We do not know who have crossed our border. Okay. What has happened in Gaza and Israel could happen here with no problem at all. Because we have had 80 known terrorists caught on the Mexican border. Not the New Mexican border. The Mexican border. Our southern border. As they have been crossing over into the United States. These are the ones that were caught and that we know about. How many of the other terrorists in the world have crossed our borders, one way or another, and are now plotting something similar to this? The people in Israel right now are calling this their 9/11. There's over 1,100 people. I've seen upwards of 1,500, depending upon which report you're reading, that have been killed by this attack. Terrorism, whether it's done by any group, is bad. And the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And they've proven that time and time again with statistics from the FBI themselves that say the minute someone else encounters, or one of these bad guys encounters a guy with a gun or a girl with a gun, it usually stops the action they're trying to commit. If you've been paying attention to the stuff in Israel right now, there was a German citizen who has been, it looks like she was raped, and looks like she was beaten, it looked like she was killed, and her naked body was paraded around the country where other people joined in beating this poor woman's body, corpse that is, to try to show their disdain for Western citizens. These people hate you. You know, it's the same with the people that are going to perpetrate any act of violence on an unarmed populace. These people hate you. You are your own first responder. And how many times do we have to see governments around the world who don't have the 2A immediately remove the ban on firearms when stuff hits the fan? You know, you saw it in Ukraine last year when the Russians rolled over their border and invaded them. Forget the politics of whatever happened there. The first thing the Ukrainian civilian population was done, the government itself, started handing out firearms, specifically fully automatic Kalashnikovs, to anyone that was willing to get one and to carry it and to go. Now, I said this in a previous podcast, that step would be remediated or not needed in the United States because most of the American populace or populations have firearms. Now, Colion Noir statistic says that 2% of the Israeli populace had firearms on day one when this happened. Okay. In the United States, that same statistic that Colion referenced, or that he said, is that up to 30% of the United States populace is considered armed. To me, I say that number is probably higher than what they're reporting or what hit statistics he's able to find. And I would say it's also dependent upon where you live in the United States, how armed you are. And in this case, a gun in the hand is better than one in the safe. One of the first things they hit is, when I say they, Hamas hit, was a rave party that was happening in Israel. They paraglided in with M16s mounted on the paragliders. You know, these are fans with parachutes attached to them, basically, giant fans. If you've lived in northern New Mexico, you see them all the time take off and fly around like lakes and stuff here. They're capable of going pretty good distances. And these guys hopped the Gaza border, you know, the fence, landed. And one of the places they've landed, and you can look for the video online, you can look at Crux. Crux, I think, had some on YouTube, where it showed some of these Gaza fighters landing at this rave. And they start opening fire on a totally unarmed populace or group of people. And people died. You know, this goes back to what we say here all the time, what I say here all the time on New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. Is stay strapped or get clapped. You know, we're in that place now where those people that hate you have no problem using violence to get their pound of flesh on anyone they see at these type of events. And I am not telling you to not live your life. You absolutely should live your life. But you absolutely should be ready and prepared for this type of thing. You know, how different would this have been in Israel if those people were allowed to carry a firearm? You know, Israel's touted for having the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, and that they're all over the place and they're always armed. And you see pictures and memes of these women and men and women in the IDF walking around with their guns strapped across them, and this is considered normal in Israel. Well, where were the numbers of those people? Because you're not seeing that many of them in action right now on day 1 or day 3 of what has happened in Israel. And if you did see it, why are we seeing the effects of what's going on? And for those of you who are very pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas, those civilian targets that they're hitting are because they were used to launch rockets and missiles into neighborhoods and hospitals in Israel. You're seeing the left right now, AOC's party, her card-carrying group of people, are calling for the genocide of the Jewish people in Israel. Now, I'm of the volition that neither side is right in this, because there's some bad stuff that Israel has done over the years towards the Palestinians by walling them off, and it's kind of an apartheid state, sort of. But you're seeing those surgical strikes. Israel has the capability to flatten Gaza, and they haven't done it. They're doing this with great restraint. And that should tell you something. But that also is very heavy-handed, because they are bombing schools, they are bombing hospitals, and they are bombing apartment complexes. But why are they doing it? Because these are nests of where Hamas has launched rockets from. There's been over 5,000 rockets launched from them. And anyone with a brain has to think about, where are they getting the weapons to perpetrate this attack? And, mostly they're getting them from Iran. But it looks like, very likely, the United States somehow armed Hamas to fight Israel. Whether we gave them to Ukraine and the Ukrainians somehow got them to Hamas, or somehow they bought them from Ukraine, or, and I would say this is probably just as likely, if not more likely, all those weapons, we left 500 or almost $1 billion worth of hardware, firearms, and ammunition, and missiles, meaning ATGMs, AT-4s, so ATGMs, anti-tank guided missiles, in Afghanistan. And we're reaping the benefits of that now, or the Israeli people are. They're paying the price for our mistake in Afghanistan. Biden did that horribly wrong. And the American military did that horribly wrong. And we knew there were going to be repercussions for how we left Afghanistan. And people like myself had always wanted us to get out of Afghanistan, especially after 20 years of fighting and only making it worse. Interventionism has gotten us to where we're at, where the state of the world is at right now. And we need to think really hard as an American people if we're going to allow other countries to buy our weapons, how are they going to be used? Or better yet, if we're going to give them to them. If there's one serial number from any weapon that they find out was used in this attack in Israel that came from Ukrainian aid, I'm all for stopping it right now. I'm for stopping it even if they don't find that. Because that stuff we leave in the battle space will come back to haunt us one way or another. Whether it's this type of thing hitting our allies, or it comes across our own border. Because these terrorists don't just sit and ruminate in one part of the world anymore. We know that after 9/11, what they did, they hit us here with planes. Think about what if that same attack in Israel, in Gaza, happened in the United States. What kind of damage could it cause here? These paraglider guys land in the middle of a football stadium during a game. Say 2 or 3 of them. Yeah, they're going to be dealt with because there are armed guards there, there are armed people there. But in that 20 or 30 seconds that they're there and they're firing into the stands, how many people would be hit? How many casualties would be taken? What if it happened to multiple football stadiums? What if it happened to them going to schools or to a concert? This is something we all need to think about. And what are we going to do to prevent it? And the only way I know of preventing it, and I say this having dealt with an actual armed shooter in a school, having dealt with the repercussions. Let me clarify that, because I wasn't actually at that school. I was just working in the district. What could you have done? You're going to have to be able to fight. That run, hide, fight You're going to have to do it. We're in that place now. We've been in that place for a long time. But as we see this stuff happening with terrorists, think about what could happen with one of these severely unhinged people that we see on Twitter, or that we see on Facebook, or that we see on some social media site, who has lost their damn mind, lost their grip on reality, and are willing to go perpetrate one of these evil, heinous acts on poor, unarmed civilians. You need to be armed. And if it takes something like a declaration of war for them to remove the restrictions on the Second Amendment, that's pretty poor. Our founding fathers knew that our only way we could ever stop tyranny, or to stop oppression, or to stop the bad guys in general, was to be able to fight for ourselves. And I'm going to go one step farther than that. Not just with the fighting for ourselves, but how do you protect them after the fact? After the violence is hit. I've mentioned this before. Do you have an ouch pouch? Do you have one of those medical first aid kits that is on your person or very close to you when this situation happens? Because it no longer seems to me that it's if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. Because if I can live in northwest New Mexico in a very small rural community, and this has not happened not once, but twice. Just this May, we had a mass shooting happen where a kid went nuts and had been having mental issues before, and he ended up killing 3 people. Two or three, I think. I have to look up that statistics. But there were hundreds of rounds fired. Again, it's not the gun. It's the person that perpetrates the act. And as we have been isolated for over 3 years with the COVID crap, and as we've been consistently at each other's throats with these stupid culture war things that matter to no one except for those that are stuck in the culture war, these things add up to the mentally insane. And then they're willing to do something stupid. There's that problem we have, and then we have people that we have turned into terrorists over 20 years of war, and we have an open southern border. It doesn't take too much of an imagination to think that these guys are on their way here. And what are you going to do about it? It's time you take a stand. It's time you be ready. And it's time that you always stay strapped or get clapped. Because where we're going, this is reality. And it looks sad, and it is sad as a society to think that, this could actually happen here, or it's going to happen here. I think it's just a matter of time before we see what's happened in Israel with these groups like Hamas and Hezbollah and ISIS, all those guys we've armed in the past because we wanted them to fight Al-Qaeda. And then when Al-Qaeda split up and broke up into ISIS and all these other ISIL and everything else, these guys still have an axe to grind with the United States and the American citizens. And whether you think it's because we've oppressed them, or the actual reality is more so they want the power that the United States has and the people of the United States has. And there's only one way that they see they're going to get it, and that's through violence. And this is where you have to be ready to fight, because these guys aren't playing around anymore. And you're seeing Israel reacting in real time. And you're seeing reports that their intelligence community heard about this stuff from Egyptian intelligence and did nothing about it. They were caught on their laurels. Doesn't it sound familiar? Just like we were in 9/11. So while we're all enchanted by the culture war and the political inroads and infighting we see, the 2A is still protecting people, whether it's here Israel, Ukraine, wherever it is around the world, people that are armed are defending themselves against these bad people. And that's all that matters. Because in reality, what I've been saying throughout this entire podcast is this is coming home to roost. Whether you like it or not, it doesn't matter. These people are nuts. Whether it's our own domestic idiots or those foreigners that are across the world that have an axe to grind with someone in the United States or have a beef of some kind and think that's their only way to get their voices heard, they're gonna do it. And the best way to stop them, because you're not going to prevent it, I don't believe at this stage of the game, is to stop them cold. Like, share, subscribe, be great.